Where did we start when we wrote Brexit and our land? We started with our vision. I don't really like visions, they're quite conceptual, but you have to start somewhere. And our vision is to maximise the amount of benefits that we get from Welsh land. There's lots of things we can get from land. If the government is paying people to do things on the land, then the natural quid pro quo is surely that we should try and get as much possible from that money. And that's what we're trying to do. There are so many things that can only be delivered by people who work on Welsh land, and we want to try and get as much as possible out of the land. And advanced biodiversity and resilient ecosystems surely has to be one of those things. It just has to be. I mean, no post-Brexit farming policy would be environmentally credible if it didn't include biodiversity, and no biodiversity policy would be credible unless it was delivered at a national scale. So for me, it's totally inarguable that biodiversity is part of land management reform. And a big challenge needs a big solution, after all. And I very much hope that reform can be, the single biggest policy change arising from the Environment Act, really. In our various groups, we've got a lot of groups in Wales, we often talk about the need for less talk and more action, and this is action with a material amount of funding behind it. We don't quite know how much money will be, but we are fighting to maintain existing spending levels. There is a really good case for spending public money in this area if we can focus it well. And it's an excellent way to demonstrate to all the people of Wales why they should care about what happens on Welsh land. There's probably about 0.5% of the population who are land managers, and I would like, and this is a big like, but it's a big ask, the other 99.5% of people to care about what happens and to see that what happens on that land affects them. I suspect, as I said, most of you will have read parts of the document. I encourage you all to respond. We have no monopoly on wisdom, as you know. Many of you know more than we do. Please write down your thoughts. We are genuinely open-minded on how we design new schemes. The only thing we are sure of is that change is necessary. As I said, I want to leave time for questions, so I just want to talk about two things to end. The first is how we might deal with biodiversity within the scheme, and the second is more about biodiversity engagement with farmers. So on the first, how might we start paying for biodiversity outcomes within the public good scheme? If you'll allow me to think out loud, the thing that we care about is outcomes. So if you have a native woodland or a pond or a streamside corridor, that's great, well done, but we don't want to pay people simply for owning these things and having them. We want to pay for the outcomes that arise from good, high-quality management of those features. So when we talk about paying for outcomes, we mean the outcomes that arise from managing those features well. And outcomes could be biodiversity, outcomes could be habitat improvement, outcomes could be carbon sequestration, outcomes could be flood management. And for many of these features, we can get multiple outcomes from them. And if we want to spend public money well, then surely we should be aiming for as many benefits as possible. So that's what we mean when we talk about paying for outcomes. Now that all sounds great in theory, but we then need to pick outcomes that are tangible and fair, because many farmers will be relying on income from the scheme to, make a living, pay for their household. So, it might be unfair to pay a farmer on the basis of how many lapwings they attract in June, because they are not in control of that. They could put all the effort in, they could tick all the boxes, but if no lapwings come, it doesn't feel fair for a farmer not to get an income. So, for example, we might think about paying the farmer on the basis of creating the type of habitat that we know to attract the lapwing in June. We start with the outcome we care about, a particular species, a particular habitat, whatever, and we work back to what is tangible and fair to pay for. You could almost think of that as proxy outcomes. This is tough to do, and it's a big change in mindset, and we're going to need all the help we can get to think it through. But that's the kind of thing we're thinking about when we talk about paying for outcomes. When it comes to biodiversity, we often talk in my team, back in Cateys, about whether we should be concentrating on habitats or species. And again, when you write your consultation responses, we'd be really interested in views on this. My team say it's about both, not either or. Interested to know whether you agree. Personally, I'm always wary of governments picking winners. My background is not in the environment, my background is in economic policy, and there's a huge range of evidence about how government is very bad at picking winners. And personally, I don't see the evidence for suggesting that some species are more important than others in ecosystems. Even if we thought we knew, we'd probably get it wrong. But that does not mean that there are some species that are very close to the cliff edge, and it might be a very good thing to spend some public money to stop them going off that edge. So we do need to think about where is the right place to focus our fire. We could spend double, triple the amount of money that we have on biodiversity. So we're going to have to pick what we care about most, and it may be different in different parts of Wales. We have to make sure that every farmer is able to access the scheme if they wish. That's really important for keeping our communities and rural villages intact. But within that, how can we get the most bang for our buck on each piece of land? And we have a national problem on biodiversity. We want to operate on a national scale. The Natural Resources Policy says we should focus on resilient ecological networks. So is that where we start? Again, open to a debate on that. Views are very welcome. We appreciate that many of these outcomes will take a long time to bring about if we are to be successful. Biodiversity has been declining for some time, decades probably, so this isn't a surprise. So we are going to try and sign some long-term contracts so we can keep getting the action on the ground happening for a consistent aim. And then finally, I want to talk about biodiversity and farming. In effect, we are trying to build biodiversity outcomes into the farm business model. That's a big change for farmers, and I think we need to be really sympathetic to that. Our goal, ultimate goal, is to make the farm business model more sustainable. We don't get all these environmental benefits from our land unless there's someone on the land doing stuff, generally. And public goods can only be produced on Welsh land. We can't import them from the Ukrainian wheat fields or Argentinian ranch. But many farmers, understandably, and I totally get this, want to keep producing food. And what I'm really wary of is every farm in Wales being split down the middle and going, that bit there is for biodiversity and that bit there is for your beef. The more I look at this, the more I think we need some form of integrated approach that tries to do both where possible, albeit sustainably. And that's going to be tough. But I think this is really consistent with what the Environment Act tells us. We spend a lot of time, at least in Welsh Government at least, thinking about what the sustainable management of natural resources means. But for me, it's really simple. It's enhancing our natural resources while building livelihoods around them. This is all really tough. As I said, we don't have all the answers. We've set out our vision, our objectives, what we think we stand for in the document. We need help to design these schemes. So please do think about your consultation response, and please do think about how you can interact with all the various groups that Welsh Government has to help us out.